as well. You know, I have nothing special to say this morning. You know, I know a whole lot of you in the room, and it is because of you that we've been able to make some things happen. The one thing we're able to brag about when we go to other states, and I'm sure that those of you who've had an opportunity to travel to other states, to attend different meetings, to hear what's happening, you know, whether you're in California or New York, or whether you're in South Carolina or Virginia or Georgia, you see that North Carolina just happens to be, I don't care what our state, we happen to be just light years ahead of everybody else. And a lot of that is purely because of collaboration. I got into this work by accident. I was running a community action agency, you know, over at Bennett, they get you all involved in the community, you know, and at first I thought I was going to be, I tell folks all the time, I was going to go out and save the world. I thought the revolution was going to be televised, and I was going to be there. And, you know, I figured I had to find a real job, but my father took the credit card back. And so I ended up working in the community action, running a local community action program, you know, with Head Start and rural transportation, and we were doing rehab on houses and sold all of that, and I ended up later on serving as a lobbyist representing the interest of older adults, low income, poor older adults throughout the South. And if you ever done that at the federal level in Washington, you know, that's a wonderful life for a while. You flying all over the country, you know where to go to hear this conversation or that conversation, and maybe I'd have lunch wherever the Republicans were and dinner wherever the Democrats were, and you go hang out and figure out, you know, what you're going to do after that. But after a while, you kind of get tired of that. So I had a friend that called me up one day, and he said, I'm over here at the Commerce Department, and I need somebody to come work with me. We're working in minority and women-owned business. You know, you want to come up here and do some economic development. I figured, I don't know economic development. It's a good time. I know this nonprofit piece. Let me go try this. And we got over there. One of the things that we learned while there, as we kind of listened back and forth to what was happening economically around the state, and also got called several times to the legislature, we realized, one, there's a dearth of data and information on what's happening economically with racial and ethnic minority populations in North Carolina. And two, there's a total disconnect between the state of these populations and the importance of business development to changing the assets in these communities. So we need to figure out how we create an entity that can, one, provide the data and the information, and also promote the business development. And shortly after we started the organization, you know, we went around and got information from business schools and from the corporate community and others, and tried to figure out, you know, you all tell us what this should look like. And I remember we thought that maybe it should be some type of center inside an institution of higher education. And we went to see Bill Friday, and Bill Friday sat us down and he said, look, you need to be a nonprofit. So you have the flexibility to respond based on whatever the trends are and the needs are, but you need to be that. So we listened, you know, I always tell people, you know, when Bill Friday spoke, people listened. And we listened. So we got folks together like Bill Friday and John Hope Franklin, all of the thinkers we could find, Joshua Smith, the business school leaders, corporate leaders, to help us think through all of this, the public policy makers. And one of the first communities that called us to say, you know, can you come help, was Greensboro. And Greensboro was kind of like our first project introduction. We really didn't tell you all, we didn't know what we were doing. And we were calling on everybody we knew around the country to come give us some advice and guidance and help. And the project that Greensboro had was this Coliseum. It was the first effort to expand the Coliseum. And to get the bond through, there had been a promise of 30% participation by the minority business community in the construction and expansion of the Coliseum. And they wanted us to help do that. And we got here, you know, and started to try to figure out really what is this? And then realized as we talked to folks that to save money, the thinking at that time on the part of the city, y'all not writing this down, are you? I don't want you all to read about this, was that they would take the top off of take the roof off of the Coliseum. All right.
Yes.
And build the Coliseum up more, but to save money, take that roof and put it on the exhibition hall. Right. Right. Like 3 or 4 companies in the country that could do that. Take the top off of Coliseum and put it on another building. And then make it go up higher. So we were saying, 3 or 4 companies in the country that can do this. How are we going to find 30% participation when you only have 3 or 4 companies that can do this? So then that meant we had to sit down. That was my first real experience in learning about certain industry sectors of construction and what you do every day. You go in, pull those projects apart and figure out the fencing and the general conditions and everything else. And maybe we got 18 or 20%. And that was a struggle. And then they asked, well, you could look at doing a capacity study for us. He said, okay. So then we had to go look through all of the records, the purchasing records, which were in a warehouse, in boxes. So I lived along with several other people for a summer in a warehouse, reading all those purchasing things and trying to, and after that experience, we decided, you know what? We're going to work with some private sector firms instead. We're going to help you figure out how to do this. And whatever we can do to be of help to you, this is not a role for a nonprofit. So I salute you on your contract and completing your disparity study. Because you were the leader in the state of North Carolina. And I'm very serious about that. Greensboro was the leader. Greensboro was the advocate. Greensboro was the voice. And the thing that was so different about Greensboro was that Greensboro approached this whole arena of minority and women-owned businesses as in the common good. That it was in the common good. You can't look at, when I look around the state of North Carolina, I always tell people, and everybody knows that I say this, and if you look at the data, it's just really clear. We are one of the fastest growing states in America. We're the 10th largest state in the country, moving to be the 8th largest state by maybe 2030. A population growth that is exploding. You have 250,000 people that live right here in the city of Greensboro, 3rd largest city in the state of North Carolina. And the diversity of our population has changed. When you look at what the population looked like here in this community, or when you look at what it was and maybe in 1970, 1960, 1990, and you look at what it is today, still today we have the 8th largest African American population, still one of the fastest growing Hispanic populations, and the largest Native American population east of the Mississippi. I think here in Greensboro, you have 40+% white population, still 40+% African American population, a growing Hispanic and Asian population. And then when I look too, you have almost 20%, almost 10% of your elderly population lives alone. Yeah, lives alone. So suggest that when some people look at that number, they get real concerned. When I look at that number, particularly given my age, is what some folks call, right, Tammy, enlightened self-interest. But then I think there's a tremendous market opportunity. When I look at that number, and when you think about that, there's a tremendous market opportunity. That's right, in whether it's the healthcare. I remember a professor and I were sitting down talking to a young man who's in the transportation business. And this young man was telling us he had moved from Atlanta to the Triangle. And while in Atlanta, he provided courier services for athletes and entertainers. And he was in the Raleigh-Durham area. And he was doing a little transportation with some hotels. He really wanted to focus on athletes and entertainment. We were saying, well, we don't have the athletic and entertainment population that they have in Atlanta. So I said, you know what? I'll tell you, I'll pay you $500 a month. If you pick my mother up just once a week and 2 of her friends and take them to lunch. And I pay for the lunch. And the other guy, who's a professor at a university, said, I give you $1,000 a month. I got an uncle in Greenville. If you go get my uncle and just take him to the barbershop, let him hang out there, half the day, and take him to church. And the guy said, I don't want to do that. I really want to focus on the athletes and the entertainment. So we just stopped the conversation. What else do you say? But you really, I say that to you to say, really, as we talk about diversity, and when you look at economic development, really think about the opportunities when it comes to the older adult population. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's the fact that, more and more people. I have a client that does nothing right now but pay the bills of older adults and, make sure that everything's taken care of. She doesn't need an office or anything. I'm just, look at those types of things. I have a niece that, and Tammy knows and some other knows. We argue because, if you're an attorney and you don't have an office, I can't figure that out. How do people know to come get your service? They don't know where to come. You at home. This is a generational problem that we have again. So she said, but I don't need an office, I got my cell phone and I got, my whatever other computers and I got a fax and I don't need that. I do contract stuff. I still say, so where you meet people? When we meet at restaurants, I don't understand how you do that. I'm just having a real problem. I talk to you at 11 o'clock in the morning and you tell me you at the gym. You need to be at work. There's some cultural challenges, we have, these generational problems. And so she told me, she said, well, why don't you just Google me? So I Googled her. I haven't said anything else to her. Into that conversation. So I say, today is a different day. And we have to be open to looking at new ways, new opportunities. And we have to learn to value everybody. Last year, or either the year before, it was interesting that a group of people got together, somebody from the Institute, the Minority Women's Business Coordinators Network, Tammy, the Hub Office, SAS, and I don't know who else. And they went to a national conference. And the presentation that they made had to do with the North Carolina Minority Women's Business ecosystem. Because what we do have is a different model of collaboration in the state of North Carolina. So there is a professional development network so that people across the state, whether they're in the public or private sector, can come and keep track of the trends and know what's going on in terms of the Minority Women's Business Coordinators Network. There is the Hub Office that can keep up and track what's going on with state and local government and provide some guidance and some support. I mean, there also are these private sector companies that are committed to making something happen. They're the resources that we may provide, but there's a strong ecosystem so that if there is something that one can't do, somebody else can pick it up. Because all of us recognize that you cannot grow a state like North Carolina unless you focus on everybody and economic development across all the spectrums. What was different about North Carolina in its history is that we were always known as the state of the working poor, unlike other southern states. So first people have to recognize that there are regional differences. So when you go around the country, whatever's happening in those things that are unique to the West Coast or the Northeast or the Southwest or the middle Western states. But when you come to the South, we have a unique history, unique culture, and a unique set of circumstances because we are the poorest region in America. If you were to look at a map and look at poverty across the South, you can follow the poverty because the poverty in large measure is concentrated along the Black Belt. And the only region in America that does not have a special federal commission committed to eradicating poverty is the South. Even Alaska has a commission. The only region in America without a commission to deal with poverty is the South. And yet, people are moving to the South. And one of the challenges that we are facing now, if we were the state that for so long, 50 plus years, marketed itself as the state of cheap land, cheap labor, and no unions, then what we're experiencing today are the vestiges of well-intentioned but poor public policies. Now we're going to have a population of older adults that will increasingly be more and more dependent, because many of them worked in those jobs that had little benefits and kept them at a low wage, so they are all probably qualified in large measure for SSI. What do you do to support that? What do you do in a nation right now that has, in North Carolina, a nation and in North Carolina, we've lost so much net worth through home foreclosures? And you've been hit by that hard as the other large cities in the state have. And that has disproportionately affected minorities and women. Then if you add to that the fact that, this whole divide and gap in wealth is continuing to get wider and wider in our nation, where one family in America today has the same amount of wealth as the bottom 40%. One family, 4 members of one family in Arkansas have the same wealth, have just as much wealth as the bottom 40% of all the people in the country. Where still the majority of people whose incomes, that top 10%, those are the folks who have realized the majority of the increases and benefits of any income growth. Not the people, not the 80% of the rest of the country. So we got some challenges. So why then it doesn't become important for us to look at minority and women-owned businesses? Well, I can say to folks that, we got 132,000 minority-owned businesses. We probably got more than 132,000. I got to give you all this old data, outdated data, because sometimes at the federal level, local government had to function because federal government kind of slow. And so I know that these numbers are much, much higher than what I'm giving you, but 132,000 minority businesses in North Carolina, $16+ billion worth of revenue, employing over 135,000 people. And I'll say to you, when you look at the minority-owned firms here in Guilford County and Greensboro, when you look at those numbers, then you know that an incentive package today would be a tremendous incentive package. I'll tell you, even A&T alone, I was just talking to Mayor Pro Tem over here, because she's going over to get a Founders Day address this morning at A&T. I was just telling her that, we did a study for A&T. A&T alone has an economic impact of over $700 million on Greensboro, its host community. $700 million, that's probably a conservative figure. Probably a conservative figure. What would an incentive package look like if somebody wanted to recruit a business that was going to have a $700 million impact, create those levels of jobs, have this much spending? We got to start to value people. Even that tiny cottage across the street, that's what the newspaper always calls it, right? Tiny cottage across the street. Right. We looked at them, and their economic impact is a little over $70 million. So is that of value to you or not? We got to educate our folks. We got to give market opportunities to people. We got to understand that it is basically in the common good. It is basically in the common good. So one, I really do want to salute Greensboro, but I want Greensboro to take the lead again. You know, we kind of felt, now this is the truth now, you know, I had this special attachment to Greensboro since I went to school here. And since you were, as people say, my first experience in standing in that warehouse reading all that stuff. I really want Greensboro to lead again because, you know, you're the center part almost of the state. You have all these educational institutions. You have more intelligence available to you than almost anybody else in the state. And more colleges. I remember at one point in time, I don't know what it is today, but I remember at one point in time, Greensboro had more college graduates per capita than any place else in America. I don't know if that's true anymore. But I tell you, when you look around at all of the intellect, when you look at all of the major corporations, the mid-sized businesses, the small businesses, and you look at the opportunities and the breadth of minority firms, all people want is opportunity. That's all they want is access to opportunity. The public sector has a responsibility to take the leadership in making that happen, and it has to happen at the top. It has to happen at the top of the corporation. It has to happen at the top of the public sector for it to make some difference. And then people got to invest resources. You know, that's like some corporations tell me, matter of fact, I got a friend right now who's head of a corporation, and he tells me how committed he is to minority businesses. So I want to tell me how much you spend. You know, you got to show me how much you spend. I like all that conversation. We can talk all day long. I want to see where your money is. Show me the money. If you can't show me the money, then let's partner on trying to figure out how we fix this. Because those individuals have the same right to have access. I tell folks, you know, part of that is just cultural too. You know, I would go to church with Hugh McCall. Really, you know, so it's about relationships. And so people know that, you know, you gotta figure out ways to acknowledge that and to figure out ways to build those relationships and to grow that access. They told me something to talk about, and I've talked about it. I'm gonna sit down in just a second. You know, it is important to have a relationship between state and local government. One, because the Supreme Court's ruling suggests that there are certain standards that should be followed by state and local units of government. When it comes to minority and women-owned firms, you know, one of the cases that we first talked about here in Greensboro, and you all took the lead to educate people around the state, was the Croson case. And in that case, the state said that, you know, units of local government, you don't have to be an active participant in discrimination. You can be a passive participant, but you have a responsibility to help fix it. Now, there are those out there today who want to challenge the whole issue of disparate impact. You know, there are housing programs for people that are looking at, if you do development over here and it displaces people over here that are low income, then is that disparate impact? So those who don't particularly like programs that deal with race or gender want to try to figure out a way to just discredit that term. That's not in the best, that's not in the common good. And somehow we have to figure out ways to create the balance, and that's what local government also has to do. Figure out ways to create balance in the conversation so that we get all sides sitting down and having, you know, at least some understanding. I heard somebody say, and some of you heard me say this, and I keep repeating it, that you gotta understand the history to have context. History is important to context. You need to know the history of this community. You need to have some understanding of the history of race and gender in America and in the South and in North Carolina. You need to understand the challenges that have faced minority and women-owned firms. Because through that context, that history, you get context. And through that context, we can have some understanding. I would hope that people just don't brush off sometimes the what seems to be the edginess of minority businesses. I tell people sometimes right now, you know, I'm getting more edgy. I don't know how much time I got left here. I don't have a whole lot of time to fix it. Hurry and fix it now. Fix it. I just get in the door, sit me beside the same people the rest of y'all sit beside. You get me in the door, I'll sell myself. But just give me the opportunity. Give me the opportunity. And so I would encourage that one of the things we do is be willing to give a little incentive to people who are willing to step out there and open up greater access to young business owners, to minority owners, to women owners, and again, to step back and provide that leadership. I've seen the state come a long way. You know, when I first started doing this work, we were doing less than 1,000% of all the business with minorities and women. And now we fluctuate somewhere between 8% and 12%. And somebody said you can't get much more than that. I was involved in a project over at that tiny college. And we just had maybe $20 million worth of construction involved with the board chair. And they did a little over 50% in terms of minority women-owned business. We realized that sitting behind the college was a minority firm that did commercial windows. That around the corner was somebody had done a lot of landscaping and did a lot of that down in, as a result of Katrina. Somebody else that naturally could do the clearing and the grading, and so the brickwork, could buy all the furniture from MWBE, you know, WB could come in and help us do some of the interior decorating. Didn't make a difference. It's about will. Y'all say amen. Amen. You know what? Talking to y'all like being at my mom's church. Well, I'm gonna sit down because I had to go. I told somebody I'm gonna join the Catholic Church. I like the Pope. The Pope, y'all know the Pope has a lot of. But the Pope has a lot of, you're right. And the Pope not scared. So, you know, I'm not wearing that dress. Another one is going to be simple. You know, I'm out here in the Pope mobile. I don't want that big old other thing. You know, give me something simple. Pass by and see a friend. Pull them on board. You know, come on, ride with me. The Pope didn't like all the people that had been reappointed to the Vatican Bank for another, 5 or 6 years by the former Pope. Pope fired all of them. All of them but one, right? The Pope is not scared. We used to be like the Pope, I'm going to be Catholic. I tell people, you know, I'm in my mama's church because I have to take her to church, and all the people in there were gracious. You know, it's about diversity as the HR group, but I tell you, I'm about one of the youngest people in there. I told somebody when the people that, you know, serve communion went to elementary school with me, yeah, you know, that's, and we can't kneel because they can't get up. You know, the choir can't get in the choir stand because they can't get up the steps, so they standing on the first pew. Make some changes in it. Make some changes. I'm going to join the Pope. I got a little bit more energy going on. It's all about diversity, right? So, you know, I'm in this. See, I'm in a lot of places, and again, you know, I know that some of you have heard me say this, and they excuse me for telling this same thing all the time. But I think it makes a good point about being appreciating folks and knowing that you can sit down with anybody and find some point of common interest, and you all can make something happen. And because, you know, sometimes it's just about acting. Do it anyway. And so, madam, you just got in your job, but human relations, act ignorant. Just don't do it anyway. You know, tell them you don't know no better. Whatever needs to be done, just go do it. Do it every day. That's right. That'll call you in and say, you know, we do need to tell you, we don't do that way. Yeah, it didn't work, right? Just get it done. So sometimes you have to do that. You know, be professional with everybody, but just go ahead and get it done. Just do something. And ask yourself sometimes, who you do build? Where do you spend your money? When was the last time you went to somebody and called on some minority woman-owned firm, other than going to get your hair done or get your hair cut? And when's the last time you did business? And sometimes we have to start with ourselves and change our own habits. You know, look at our own values. But also remember, you know, when it seems like you can't get through even with a corporation or whomever else, then you can change anybody by sitting down, realizing that you can find some point of common interest. And so finally, and I know Tammy gonna tell me if I say this one time, I'll be in real trouble. But I'm gonna tell you this again. I tell folks all the time that, there's a story about a man that hadn't been going to church. And hadn't been probably going to my mom's church. Hadn't been to church in a long, long time. And and a friend of his told him there was an exceptional minister. Before I tell this story, Yvonne, I just must say to you that I heard who was speaking last week at Providence. I told him that's why y'all had this phone, right? Lights that lights out, but this man had not been to church in a long time. So this friend of his told him, we had this exceptional minister, and you need to come to church with your lifestyle. You just need to come to church. You need to hear something else and change your values and your ways. So after talking to him so much, the man agreed that he'd finally go to church. So he went to this church, heard this sermon, and really got excited about what he heard. Really was, had a different impression. Was glad he'd come. So at the end of church service, the minister went to the back of the church, greeted the people, and this man, but by the time he got back there, he said, Rev, I want you to know I really enjoyed your sermon. It was a hell of a sermon. And the minister looked at him and he said, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you enjoyed my sermon. You just don't use that kind of language in church. So he said, well, I understand, Rev, but let me just tell you, it's been a long time since I've been to church. And I really enjoyed that sermon. I think that sermon's going to change my life. It was a hell of a sermon. Just a hell of a sermon. And the minister said, like I told you, sir, brother, I'm glad you came today. And we want you to come back. And I hope, we did. I did say something that's going to have a good effect on your life, but I want you to know that you're not just on the church ground, you're in the church. You can't use that kind of language. We don't use that language at church. It's just not language that people should use here at the church. So I appreciate it. I want you to come, but you can't use that language. So he said, Rev, I understand what you're saying, but let me tell you, I enjoyed that sermon so much that when that sister came by with that plate, I put a check for $5,000 in the plate. And the Reverend looked at him and said, no shit. My point there is purely that everybody can find someone. You can get people's attention one way or the other. I want to thank you for inviting me early in the morning. Hope I said something. And I do want you to know that I look to Greensboro. So again, you're the leader in our state. You made such a difference. If there's anybody that can do this again, particularly when it comes to minority women-owned firms, it's Greensboro. So thank you.